Good afternoon, everybody. You'll have to forgive the punchiness. We have had some excellent barbecue from Lockhart, and we just had cake as well, so we're a little wound up. But my name's Anna. I'm the Chief Revenue and Innovation Officer for TRA and also your webinar person. And we're really excited to present this topic today. We've been getting tons of different questions. I know Kelsey has, especially around what all the new laws that are likely to go into effect on September 1 mean for restaurants and what they need to do to protect themselves now if that's necessary. Please, if you have questions, and I'm sure many of you do, put them in the chat window or in the Q&A window, and we'll be sure to get to your questions as soon as we can. Or just raise your hand or whatever, we'll turn it on you so that you can ask your question directly as well. We are also monitoring Facebook Live for this too, so if you're watching on Facebook, go ahead and put your comment or question in there, and we'll be sure to get to it as well. So with that, I will turn it over to Kelsey Erickson Streufert. Thanks, Kelsey.
Hey y'all, thanks for joining us today. As Anna said, I'm Kelsey Erickson Streufert. I'm our Vice President of Government Relations and Advocacy. And this presentation is just to kind of quickly go through some of the many new laws that are coming into effect either this past summer or on September 1, so that you know what's going on and what you need to do to be in compliance. So with that, we will dive in. Let's see if I can work PowerPoint. Yes. Okay, so I wouldn't be a good lawyer if I didn't start with some disclaimers. This is just general guidance for TRA members. I can't provide legal advice to every single one of you, but we do have our TRA Law Center. So check that out if you have specific questions. And then all of this is off the record as well. Have some corny little lawyer jokes on there, because if you can't make fun of yourself, then you know, what's the point? So now we'll dive in. So this is just kind of a snapshot of what regular sessions look like here in Texas. So you can see there's only 140 days in a regular session. And this past session, only about 15% of the bills that were filed actually were passed into law. So that just kind of gives you some context. And then here's really TRA's impact by the numbers. So one of the things I'm most proud of is we actually had a 100% success rate at blocking bills that TRA opposed. And we'll talk about a few of those at the end of the presentation. We testified before a committee 24 different times. In many instances, that was our actual members who came to the Capitol and shared their perspective with the legislature, which is incredibly valuable. We also tracked 865 separate bills and sent over 3,000 emails to just our Texas legislators. That doesn't even count all of the federal email campaigns that we've done and the local ones as well. So I can't say enough how big of an impact that has at the Capitol. I'm going to go quickly through our priority bills because at this point you're probably sick of hearing me talk about them. But as y'all know, we had 8 priority bills, 6 of them passed into law. So we obviously had a much higher passage rate than the rest of the legislature. So that's exciting. We'll go through each of these really quickly. So first, alcohol to go. Hopefully you were all familiar with that one by now. Just a couple reminders on this one. It does cover beer, wine, and spirits, including cocktails that you mix and seal on site. TABC is actually in the middle of a rulemaking process on this to define what a tamper-proof container is for the purpose of this law. We'll share that in one of our nightly emails soon. So definitely stay tuned for that. The draft rule is already in really good shape. And this is just a really important revenue stream for so many restaurants, not just while we're in this pandemic, but really as the industry evolves and consumer demands change. So very excited about that one. Another quick note on this, make sure that you're taxing your alcohol to go correctly. It's just the sales tax that applies to cocktails to go, not your higher standard taxes for on-premise alcohol. So that's something we can get into later if anyone has any questions, but do want to call that out because that is a tax savings. Next is PVP and RRF deductibility. Y'all are probably pretty familiar with this one too. We worked really hard at the federal level to make sure that these relief funds were tax-free as intended. Then we found out we needed to mirror that change in our state law as well. And that's really what this bill was about. Really proud of the fact that we got it amended midway through the process to also include those RRF grants. Many states were kind of behind the curve on that and are still working on this issue. So the fact that we were able to do it for both PPP, RRF, and actually any of the relief programs that are tax-free at the federal level are now tax-free here in Texas too. Third-party delivery transparency. I'll spend a little more time on this because this really is two bills in one. And many of y'all will recall that during the pandemic, bars were shut down when restaurants were allowed to stay open, but there was a lot of confusion about what was a bar and what was a restaurant. So we actually put in this third-party delivery bill a restaurant definition so that if we ever find ourselves in a similar position in the future where restaurants are allowed to do one thing and bars aren't, it's much easier for you all to qualify as a restaurant. So that's a really important change that'll pave the way for future policy improvements too. And then of course, the third-party delivery piece is really important as well. Many of y'all know that we took a somewhat novel approach, frankly, in Texas. We didn't go after a fee cap because we knew that wasn't something that would be likely to pass in the Texas legislature. And so we really created transparency and what I call sort of fair dealing protections. So things like a third-party service can't use your trademarks in a misleading way. They can't charge you any fees unless they're agreed to in writing beforehand. And then importantly, if you as a restaurant decide that third-party delivery does not fit your business, you can tell the company to take you off their platform and they actually have to honor that within a set period of time. And if they don't, you can actually sue them and go to court and enforce your rights. Several other protections in that bill. And again, I think it just sets the stage for the way that this industry is evolving and is changing. Grocery waiver. This makes permanent the waiver that many of our restaurants enjoyed during the pandemic to sell their raw and bulk products in their stores without obtaining that second permit like a grocery store. Again, just gives us more revenue opportunities, more opportunities to innovate in the long term. Pandemic liability. This is another one you're probably pretty familiar with at this point. Key thing I want to highlight here is that the bill is actually retroactive back to the beginning of the pandemic. So even if a year from now, someone sues you and says in April 2020, I got COVID at your business, they would have a much more difficult time proceeding with that lawsuit because of this bill that was passed with SB 6. Not impossible to sue someone for giving them COVID, but it does make it much more of an uphill climb so that you don't have those frivolous and unfair lawsuits you have to defend against. Last but not least, we have the unemployment insurance tax relief. This is a wonky one. I'm not going to explain all the background, but the takeaway is the unemployment tax rate that all businesses pay so that there are funds available for unemployment benefits. That rate would have skyrocketed without the passage of this bill. And because this bill passed, the Texas Workforce Commission was able to keep that rate stable this next year. That's so key. None of you can afford a tax increase right now. That's not the right thing to do for our economy or for our businesses. And so this was a really important bill in that rebuilding effort. So now let's dive into some of the other bills that you might be less familiar with, but they still could have a significant impact on your business. Guns. This is probably the bill that I am getting the most questions about. So I do want to take some time to kind of get into the nitty-gritty on this. So this is the permitless carry bill. Important to note that it does go into effect on September 1. So it has not been effective yet, but we all need to start preparing and planning for what will go into effect on September 1. So first of all, just what does the bill do? It basically says that if you are legally allowed to possess a gun, meaning you don't have certain criminal convictions, you're old enough, you have to be at least 21 years old, then you can carry a handgun in public without first obtaining a handgun license from the state. Previously, you had to get first it was a concealed handgun license, then it was just called a handgun license from the Department of Public Safety. So that requirement will go away. Some things in the law remain intact. So you still, if you're carrying a handgun in public, it has to be either concealed or basically in a belt holster. And you still can't bring that handgun into places where it's traditionally prohibited. So schools, hospitals, jails, prisons, right? All of those places are still no gun zones. But now you don't have to get that permit before you actually start carrying. So for restaurants and bars, the impact of this bill is going to be a little complicated. Many of you are familiar with that 51% sign from TABC. That sign remains in place. And if you derive 51% or more of your income from on-premise alcohol sales, so I want to highlight on-premise there, and you don't have a food and beverage certificate. So if you meet both of those qualifications, then you are required to post that 51% sign, and that prohibits people from bringing firearms onto your premises. And if they violate the terms of that sign, that is technically criminal trespass. They can be arrested, prosecuted, etc. So for those businesses, kind of your more traditional bars, really nothing changes under this law. Where it gets more complicated are your other restaurants and bars. So up until September 1st, you had to have that blue sign. Well, that blue sign is basically going away. And instead, you are treated like all other private businesses, and you can choose whether or not you want to allow customers to bring guns onto your property. There's 3 different signs in statute. You've probably seen them. They're often called a 30-06 sign. They're pretty big. They have to be in English and in Spanish. They have to have specific language. So now we have 3 versions of that sign in law. One says if you are not licensed, you cannot bring guns onto the property. One says if you are licensed, you can't open carry on the property. One says if you're licensed, you can't concealed carry on the property. So businesses have a lot of choices. They could post one or more of those signs that I just explained, or you can post your own sign and come up with your own policy. Maybe you only want to ban concealed carry, for example, or maybe you only want to ban open carry and you don't care if someone has a license or not. You don't want to see anyone carrying a gun. In that case, you can create that policy and you can create your own signs, but you do need to note that it's probably not a crime. It probably doesn't cross that threshold as a crime to bring a gun in if it's not one of these specific signs laid out in statute. My guess is that doesn't matter to a lot of y'all because you're not necessarily looking for a criminal penalty to attach to this. You just want to be able to set your own policies for your business and enforce them with your employees. In that instance, post whatever sign you want, make sure it's clear. Just know that you may need to provide a more specific warning if someone violates the terms of your sign before it technically becomes a criminal penalty. Hopefully that was clear. I know it gets really complicated and confusing, but I think the really important takeaways for restaurants are 1, if you're a 51% business, you still have to have the 51% sign, nothing changes. If you're not in that category, then you need to decide what your gun policy will be and make sure that you clearly communicate that to your guests. Anna, I can tell you have a question.
Yes, I do. Actually, Joseph does in the chat, and he has a very good question, one we have just finished talking about, and he's asking, where are these signs available for printing or ordering?
Great question. The 51% sign will still be available from TABC. I'm sure we'll be able to download. They probably have to update the language slightly, but I have every faith that will basically look like it has in the past with the big red 51% behind the text. The other signs, it's a little less clear. There's not a government agency that is regulating this. So it's not like TABC where they promulgate their own signs and their own rules. And so we're going to see a lot of businesses create their own signs. Anna and I were just discussing that we, as TRA, would be happy to kind of share some examples, share some language for our members to download and use. But we're going to see it vary. And I do just want to emphasize the importance of being clear with your guests about what your policy is, because there's so many choices now. And I do think that's going to confuse some folks. And as we know in this time, right, we've seen it with masks, we've seen it with all of these kind of requirements, you're going to have a few customers who are more difficult, right? That's just kind of the way it is. And so one of the things that I'm doing in my advocacy role with TRA is talking to our government officials and talking to our law enforcement agencies to make sure they know this is coming and to make sure that they're very clear about what businesses can and can't do, what customers can and can't do, so that if they need to step in and frankly be there to support businesses enforcing their own rights, then they're prepared and ready to do that. So we will share some example signage is the short answer to that question.
Yeah, Kelsey, we're getting some more questions on that, and we'll definitely make sure we can make that available. So we'll post something to the website and also to the mobile app so you know where to go to look for that language. So Lynn, I know you were asking about that too. We'll just post that later. Then Jose has sort of the next part of the question, which is if someone refuses, right? If someone refuses to put their gun away, even with the signs posted, what proceeds? Do you call the police? What's the best course of action?
Yeah, you certainly can call the police. As I said, there are criminal trespass penalties attached to this. The level of the offense varies. So for example, if you have a sign posted and someone violates the sign, they come right on in with their gun. If you have a hostess or a server, you probably would have a manager, right? Go up to that person and say, I'm so sorry, but we actually don't allow guns, or we don't allow open carry of guns. If at that point the person refuses to leave, refuses to put their gun in their car, absolutely call the police. At that point, it's a relatively serious criminal offense. But the bottom line is make sure your managers in particular understand what the policy is and feel empowered if they need to talk to customers about this. And if there's ever a sticky situation, a concern, a safety concern, I would absolutely call the police. There's something else I was going to say that I just forgot. But yes, that is the bottom line, is there are criminal penalties attached to this. Oh, the other thing I was going to say is if you're in a situation where you need to directly confront a customer about this, they did specify in the law that you can do that orally or in writing. Sounds a little strange, but I do think we will see some people use a note, for example, a little written note, instead of actually having that verbal confrontation. I think some people will be a little more comfortable with that. So just know that's also an option. But I think the most important thing is that you have that sign. If you want to prohibit guns in some way, make sure you have that sign and make sure it's as clear as it can be about what is and is not allowed. So open versus concealed, licensed versus unlicensed. Or I also suspect we're going to have a lot of people just say, all of these options are too confusing, too ambiguous. I'm just prohibiting guns outright, right? And that's clear. If you see a gun, you know someone's violating the policy. I think we're going to see a lot of that just because it's the more straightforward approach.
Yeah, agreed. And Catherine said she liked your idea about the note in the chat, and I agree. That's a very easy, non-confrontational way to sort of slide a message to somebody, especially for some of our younger staff that work in restaurants. Jose, I see you have
and
your
again,
hand raised.
slide them the note. If they don't immediately leave, that's when you can pick up the phone, call the police, and never even have a confrontation at all, right?
Exactly. Jose, I see you have your hand raised. I'm going to click so I can allow you to talk in case you had a question to follow up on related to this.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Kelsey. Thank you, Anna. How are you guys doing?
Good.
Good. Thanks for being here, Jose.
Thank you for this. But my question, and it's following up on this that we're talking about. Do we know how much the local law enforcement or police are going to be behind restaurants or not? Or is there anything that you can provide as TRA so that we can go talk to them or go hand out to them? You know, I think some people are going to have that question in mind?
Yeah, great question.
Thank
Happy
you.
to provide, short bullet point talking points or whatever you need to have that conversation locally. I think this is one of those examples of why being involved with your local chapter of TRA is so important, because they're the ones who are, and Jose is the poster child for this. He's very involved in his local chapter. But y'all locally are the ones who are going to have the connections with your local law enforcement, right? And so this is one of those issues that it's important to have that conversation ahead of time. But yes, we will absolutely provide you with talking points, information, to make sure that that conversation is productive and helpful. And we'll be talking to our executive directors about spearheading this locally as well. All right, moving on from guns for now. Here is the other one that we've all been talking about a lot lately, vaccine passports. So this bill is already in effect. It went into effect in June, and it actually had a lot of pieces in it, most of which, frankly, don't really impact restaurants. It was kind of the bill that responded to COVID. But one piece of it does impact restaurants and all businesses, and it deals with vaccine passports. And basically what it says is a business cannot make a customer show proof of vaccine for COVID in order to receive a service or entry into the business. So a couple things to highlight there. One, it's only about customers. So this does not impact vaccine requirements or incentives or anything like that having to do with your employees. This is customer only. Secondly, there are ways, so it is limited to a vaccine passport. So that doesn't cover things like negative test requirements, health screenings, temperature checks, right? All of those other COVID protocols, screening protocols are not impacted by this bill. So it really is a fairly narrow prohibition. Just says you cannot require your customer to show proof of a COVID vaccine to get a service from your business. As y'all know, we're seeing requirements that are basically the opposite of this. In many parts of the country, New Orleans, New York, San Francisco, Texas has obviously taken a very different approach. But again, I want to emphasize it's just customers and it's just proof of COVID vaccine. It doesn't prohibit other kinds of screening protocols. Anna, any questions on this?
Not right now, wait, hold on, let's see. Gina said that Harvey had a question. Hold on, let me go back up to see. Oh, well, it's not really phrasing the question, and we will circle back around to the gun question at the end of this too. I know we're going to have some other lingering questions. So related to vaccine passports, no questions coming in here. Yesterday, while at the TVNA conference, I know this was a major topic of discussion as well, but it seems pretty straightforward. And right now, as you mentioned, TABC, who's responsible for enforcing this, is only doing through education right now, which is really nice, and they emphasize that multiple times. But no other questions at the moment.
Yeah, and I'm glad Anna mentioned TABC. So every state agency that issues any kind of business license is tasked with enforcing that. So for our industry, that would be TABC. If you're a plumber, it's the plumbing board, right? If you're a realtor, it's the real estate commission. So just know this isn't a restaurant specific or targeted bill. This is every business, and lots of different state agencies are going to be enforcing it. All right, some more bills. Regulatory relief. So HB 17 is one that I think a lot of y'all are going to be excited about. This basically prohibits electric and other types of utilities from discriminating based on the type of hookup you want. So we saw this issue in California. It's kind of an environmental issue where utilities and cities were making it more difficult to select natural gas as your heat source. Obviously, that is a huge problem for restaurants because we need natural gas for the high temperature and for cooking. So this bill nips that, makes sure that City of Austin, other cities can't go down that road of essentially forcing you to choose electric instead of natural gas. Senate Bill 424 is you can read it right there, basically just gives you an opportunity to cure if you violate a agency rule. There are exceptions for, violations that affect health and safety and those types of issues. But basically, it's just a chance to correct your mistake before you're fined for kind of paperwork errors and that sort of thing. Here's some alcohol bills to be aware of. HB 1518. This is an interesting one. This is your classic alcohol bill, whereas it started as one issue and by the end it was kind of a different bill. So the original bill allows hotel bars and really any restaurant or bar within a hotel to sell alcoholic beverages at any time of the day. So they don't have the same 2 a.m. cutoff. And then at the end of session, it was amended to allow grocery and gas stores and those types of stores to sell beer on Sundays beginning at 10 a.m. Previously, they had to wait until noon to make those sales. Restaurants can obviously sell booze beginning at 10 a.m. already, so this doesn't impact us. And it also does not impact liquor stores and hard liquor sales. This is just beer in your grocery and convenience stores. That will go into effect on September 1. So that's a relatively big change to our alcohol laws. And this next bill I'm pretty excited about. It's HB 2127, and it's called Alcohol in Public Entertainment Zones. I think this is going to be really exciting from a tourism and kind of economic development perspective. I think it's something we need to look at how we can leverage. Basically, it says for the 18 largest cities in Texas, they can designate a public entertainment zone and people can essentially do open containers of alcohol within that zone. So they can start in one restaurant, they can take their open bottle, walk into the store right next door, walk from there to the art exhibit next door, right? So you can mingle and take your alcohol in that whole zone. They're looking to do this in Arlington, but I'm sure it'll be in other places too. So that's an exciting change to keep an eye on. HB 3897 is kind of a cleanup bill, won't impact most of our restaurants.
Kelsey?
Yes.
Sorry. So as people are sort of digesting this, they're asking questions related to it. So Jessica was asking on HB 1518, alcohol can be purchased 24 hours a day from hotels?
Restaurants and bars within a hotel. The thinking was it's sort of like your house, right? And you can drink at any time of the day. You can drink from any time from your mini bar. So why can't you get a cocktail from your hotel bar at any time of the day? Economically speaking, is it going to make sense for most hotel restaurants and bars to man their bar all night? Probably not, but I guess in some areas it will. So,
got it. Good question though, Jessica. Thank you.
And I do want to be clear, it's restaurants and bars within a hotel. So it doesn't necessarily have to be owned by the hotel or, that hotel's restaurant. We often
it could be delivered to like room service, or if you ordered on Uber Eats or DoorDash, it could be delivered to your room. 24?
Well, it has to be a restaurant or bar located in the hotel.
Okay.
But it doesn't have to be the hotel's owned.
Got it.
So if you're leasing space in a hotel, this would apply to you.
So room service would you have to, this is so niche, right? But would you have to go down and get it? Or is it okay for someone to bring it up to your room at 3 a.m?
I think they can bring it up to your room. I don't recall a limit.
So robots could deliver alcohol in
the hotel bar. Okay. We'll have to see if Horseshoe Bay at our next TRA board meeting, what their policy is going to be.
Very true. Okay, thanks, Kelsey.
Okay, so yeah, HB 3897, it really just cleans up local government charges for brewer licenses, so not going to impact most of us. But this is one of those bills that TRA actually watched very closely and actually had amended to make sure that it didn't have unintended consequences for all of y'all. So just a little plug there. And then Senate Bill 195, drink solicitation. This is really getting at human trafficking. As y'all know, there is a horrific amount of human trafficking that happens in Texas. And the bar scene, unfortunately, is one of the places where we see it happen most often. So this just adds to the list of offenses where if you're convicted of that, you cannot get a new TABC license for 3 years. I'm sure none of y'all are doing this, so I'm not too worried about it, but I do want to flag it for you. Couple others, HB 1957, this strengthens the labeling standards for Texas wine. This is exciting because, as y'all know, Texas has a growing wine industry, and our labeling standards were always pretty lax in Texas. So this kind of is a truth in labeling issue that should help our local Texas wineries. And then HB 1755, this is wine to go. Not effective until September 1, but it actually is encompassed within the alcohol to go bill that we got passed, so it doesn't really matter. But it just basically says, if you open a bottle of wine with your dinner, you can also take an unopened bottle of wine home with you as long as you did order food. Again, that would also be covered under our alcohol to go bill. Liability, HB 19 is one that I know many of y'all heard about, mostly from our suppliers, right? So this deals with commercial vehicle accident litigation. There was a lot of abusive and just junk lawsuits in this space, right? Where there's some kind of accident involving a commercial vehicle, whether that's an 18-wheeler or just a truck, a delivery truck. And so this bill tries to kind of tamp down on that and, just get rid of some of those bad lawsuits. Senate Bill 199, this has to do with AEDs. Those are the machines that can basically jumpstart your heart if you have a heart attack. Recommend all of y'all take a look at this one because it does make it a lot easier for restaurants and other businesses to keep an AED on their premises. Basically just deals with tort reform issues. So you don't have to worry that, if you have an AED and someone uses it wrong or someone uses it right, that it doesn't save the person that you're going to be sued. It basically protects you from that liability so that more businesses are willing to get those machines and potentially save someone's life. So that's an exciting bill as well. This is one we've heard a little bit about, SB 45. It deals with sexual harassment. Traditionally in Texas and other places, if you had fewer than 15 employees, you weren't covered by many of the sexual harassment and other discrimination laws. This bill expands that, so now all employers are covered by the prohibition on sexual harassment in the workplace. I'm not going to get into the specifics here because it gets kind of complicated, but really the thing that you all need to take away from this is if you hear or know that sexual harassment is occurring in your workplace, you need to immediately investigate it, take steps to prevent it, take corrective action. Otherwise, you can be held liable as the employer. So make sure that you have a sexual harassment policy, and that's something our law center partners can help with, and make sure that you're taking any of those allegations seriously. Economic relief. There were quite a few economic relief bills that could help restaurants. So SB 153 is one that we really helped with. And it was really a clarification, but it's an important clarification. It said that payment processing servers, so that's anytime you use a credit card, debit card, a gift card, it's that swipe charge, right? Clarifying that swipe charge is not subject to Texas's sales tax. So obviously, if that were to change, that would be a huge tax increase for all of you, especially as consumers increasingly use credit and debit cards. There was some concern that the comptroller was changing his interpretation on that. So that's really why we needed this bill to clarify in law forever that those swipe charges are not subject to sales tax. And then SB 742, this is also an important one for the future. So y'all will remember when the pandemic hit and all of the property tax bills went out, there was no way for local governments to charge you those taxes in installments. because even though it was a disaster, it wasn't a disaster that physically impacted your property or your business. This law changed that, so now they can accept installment payments for property taxes when there's a disaster like a pandemic that devastates your business but doesn't physically alter your premises. Here's some others. I'm not going to dive deep into these because they're pretty specific to small and micro businesses, but these basically create new revolving funds, new opportunities for the government to help very small businesses impacted by a disaster. They do need to be funded, so that's an important thing with a lot of these relief programs. You often have to make sure it's set up, and two, that there's funding available, but it does set the stage for future economic relief. Workforce development. This was a pretty big bill that, I don't think we'll see the payoff immediately, but it is important for our work with ProStart and other economic development workforce commission stuff that we're working on. It basically just has our agencies. So we have the Texas Education Agency. They deal with, K through 12. Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board deals with our community colleges and higher ed institutions. And then the Workforce Commission, as y'all know, is more adult learners and re-education. So this bill really makes sure that those three agencies are working together, that they're identifying what needs we have across the state, and that our education processes and outcomes are aligned with those needs. So I know that was a lot, and there's actually a lot more bill summaries, believe it or not, and here's how you can get to them. Please make sure you're registered for our app. It really is the best way that we can send y'all real-time information. And it also has great resources like all of these bill summaries. Anna, any questions?
Yes.
Take a sip of water.
Yeah, take a sip of water. I'm posting where people can download the app here. You have to be a member to get access to the app. Just FYI, it is for members only, so make sure you're a member in good standing. If for some reason you're not approved for the app, that's really the only reason why. But our team will make sure that you're taken care of. But yes, she's absolutely right. That's where we post all the information the fastest, and we usually send push notifications to let people know, but we don't go crazy on those. We try and keep that minimal. So, okay, yes, we do have some questions. I'm going to go with what I think is the easiest one, is can you consume alcohol while carrying a weapon?
Yes, this is Texas. It is still a crime to carry a weapon in public if you are intoxicated, but it is not illegal to drink while you have a gun.
Right, exactly. So can't get intoxicated. Okay.
That wasn't as simple of answer as you probably thought it was going to be.
Well, I mean, well, there's some other doozies waiting for you. So I think that was the simplest one of the ones that I saw. So, okay, let's see here. Let's go to Lauren's, because that's related to alcohol sales tax. She's asking for to-go or off-premise alcohol sales tax calculation. Is there a link that can be provided with more details on that? Basically, just where can she look to make sure that, like, it's 8.25% for off-premise alcohol sales and 14% for on-premise alcohol sales?
Yes, we actually shared a kind of bulletin that we received from the comptroller early in the pandemic. It was probably a few months into the pandemic. He realized that many restaurants were taxing to-go alcohol incorrectly to the restaurant's detriment, right? So he sent us some language. I'm sure it's still on their website. We can probably share it again. But it did outline specifically that off-premise alcohol sales are just subject to your regular sales tax rate. So just like your food and any other goods, not the higher mixed beverage taxes.
Got it. But we can pull that out whenever we post the recording for this. We'll pull that out again so that we can show everyone, so if in case you have questions, or if your accountants or your lawyers that you work with have questions, you can give them that information. Another question from Anonymous is, do you have a good gauge on how many restaurants have started requiring vaccination from their team, like from their actual staff? I'm assuming is what you're asking. I don't have a good handle on the number. We only know anecdotally that some people are and some people are not. We did a survey a while ago But it's probably time to do another one to see where everyone is on that. Kelsey, do you have an idea?
And that was more mask focused, I think. Yeah, we could do another survey. I think my sense, I mean, this is anecdotal, absolutely. My sense is it's the minority, but I also think it's increasing. And I think that it varies by geography. So in our more kind of urban areas, we see more of it than in our rural and suburban areas, but it does vary. We're also seeing some folks implement a policy where you either have to be vaccinated or, do a weekly test, right? There's other kind of options that are provided. You have to be vaccinated or you have to wear a mask, right? There's some of that. Please make sure if you're requiring vaccines, and our TRA Law Center partner, Maya and Ramirez, have done a great summary of this for us that we can reshare again. You do have to provide exceptions for religious exemptions and health exemptions. So it's a small minority, but some people cannot get the vaccine for health reasons. You've got to be able to provide that option to that group, and you have to have some kind of system to vet those claims. So just make sure if you're going down that path, you absolutely can, but just make sure that you have to follow some of those legal requirements.
Great. So Rena, I know she had to leave, but we'll go ahead and answer this question for her. Related to vaccine, it's as well. A local bar hosted a concert and the singer requested and required vaccines. So how would you ask customers to comply on that? Can you ask customers to comply with the singer's requirement with that law in place?
So my response to that is, if you as the business holder need a license from TABC, then I would be protective of your license and make sure that you're doing everything you can to comply with the law, because you don't want to put your alcohol license in jeopardy. So obviously I don't know the contracts with the singer and that type of thing, but if it's happening on your premises, you need to make sure you're following the law so your license isn't in jeopardy. We have seen some singers and concerts and events implement that option. So it's vaccine or proof of negative test. That's something you might want to explore with, any singer or group coming into your venue. In my experience, most people are willing to accept that as an alternative to a true vaccine requirement, because it kind of gets you to the same place, but in a way that you don't jeopardize your alcohol license.
Yeah, you don't want to lose that. Tamara,
we'll say too, we do need to do some education on this, because it is very different than the laws of other states. And so I think that's part of what we're seeing, is that many of these groups that travel around and do lots of different performances across the world, we've got to explain to them Texas actually has a different law, a different legal requirement. And I think once we do that, most people will be willing to work with you.
Yeah, exactly. Tamara is asking about new tip restrictions, and doesn't look like that came up. So Kelsey, do you know what she might be asking about?
Yeah, so that's this slide, actually. I've just had it up here and haven't been talking about it. This kind of generally lists some bills that did not pass. And the reason that I have this on here is twofold. One, it shows some of the benefits of TRA advocacy and being a part of this community. It's not just about passing good laws. Often much of our work is stopping bad laws. So here's some of those examples. And then I also list them here because usually these bills that we, successfully defeat in one session, they have a habit of coming back in subsequent sessions. It's kind of like whack-a-mole. So this is a pretty early warning that these are some of the same issues we're going to need to continue to defend against. So we've got new wage and benefit mandates. There were several bills filed to either raise the minimum wage, index the minimum wage to inflation, change the tip credit, certain required paid sick leave benefits, right? All of that sort of stuff will come up session after session. So that's something we need to be thoughtful about. Predictive scheduling is another one that keeps coming up, both at the local level and at the state level. So we need to make sure we're sharp on that. Labeling restrictions. This was an interesting fight. The alternative meat fight, it's a mouthful, alternative meat fight, was a really interesting one that was pushed by our friends in the cattle ranching industry. And our friends in the alternative meat industry were very much opposed to it. So that's something that we're going to have to keep an eye on as well. New tip restrictions. So that was a bill that said that a business who has tipped workers cannot keep the tips in any way, shape, or form, which sounds cut and dry on its face. The problem is many restaurants actually process the tips through their payroll for various reasons. We were unsure if that would still be allowed under the language of the bill. Tip sharing schemes, we weren't sure if those would be allowed under this language. And then some restaurants deduct the swipe fee from tips, or a proportion, right, of the swipe fee from tips. So all of those issues could have been impacted by that bill. We opposed it. We were able to stop it in committee, so it really didn't go anywhere. But I do think, on the far left, there is increasing hostility to the tip wage model. We've definitely seen it at the federal level. We're starting to see it a little bit in Texas. So it's something that we need to really educate folks on and just kind of be protective over. Hopefully that answers that question. If not, feel free to type in another one.
Yeah, no, I think it does. Let me scroll up from Jessica. So Casey actually was asking an interesting question. How would the new HB 19 affect someone currently involved in a lawsuit involving commercial accident?
Probably wouldn't. Let me see what the effective date on that bill is. It is very rare for bills to be retroactive. That's why I highlighted that for the pandemic liability bill. It's extremely rare. And sometimes it's unconstitutional, right? Because if you have certain rights one day and then the government says we're going backwards and taking those rights away from you, that can create constitutional issues. So normally, so this one's not effective until September 1. So I'd have to look at the language, but my strong suspicion is that it only impacts lawsuits filed on or after September 1. That's the usual language.
Yeah, that sounds good. And Casey, I would definitely touch base with your lawyer on that if you have additional questions, but yeah.
And I'll note on that bill too, we didn't officially weigh in on that bill because it's not kind of directly related to restaurant operations, but I do think we could see a benefit. Commercial vehicle insurance was getting increasingly high and difficult to obtain, which was of course driving the price of ingredients and other supplies up. So I do think that's one that will have a kind of tangential benefit for our industry.
Great. So Jessica has this other question. Jessica, thank you for being so involved in this one. She said, I'm sorry if this has been addressed already. Can we still allow our team to remove their masks by choice if they are vaccinated and still require our non-vaccinated team to wear masks? I've been told that we can't require vaccine cards for proof. So can we go back to requiring our team to wear a mask while working, even if the CDC does not require it?
Yes, masks, you have total flexibility to set your own policies for guests and employees. You can require everyone to wear a mask. You can require only, customers to wear a mask, only employees. You can't discriminate, obviously. You can't say everyone over 50 has to wear a mask and everyone younger can't. Only women wear masks and men don't. You can't do that. But aside from those specific discrimination protections, you can set whatever mask policies you want. You can also require your employees to get vaccinated. You just can't require that of your customers. So masks, you have total decision-making. Vaccines, the only thing you cannot do is require it of your customers.
So you can require your team to show proof of vaccination before working?
Yes.
Okay. And we do have some language from one of our law center partners, like Kelsey mentioned, Monty Ramirez, on that and on requiring your staff to be vaccinated. We'll circulate that around with this information as well, just so everyone has that in front of them. Okay. Maria has a question over here in the Q&A window. Hey, Maria, she says 8.25% is the mixed beverage sales tax charged to the consumer, and us as businesses pay it to the Comptroller of Public Accounts. But as a business, we also have to pay 6.7% mixed beverage gross receipts tax. I think she's just making sure that sounds correct.
So yes, for on-premise alcohol sales, if you have a mixed beverage permit. So if you have a full bar, that is correct for on-premise. But for off-premise, it's just the regular sales tax. You don't have to deal with the gross receipts tax at all.
Great. So no gross receipts tax for off-premise alcohol sales. Got it. Okay.
Correct.
Great. It will be interesting. Yeah. Okay. So we'll have to talk to the comptroller's office about that to see how they handle that. But okay. And then
by the
Lauren
way, if you were doing that incorrectly, you can go back and amend your filings with the comptroller and get I guess it wouldn't be a rebate. It would be a refund. That's the word.
Yeah.
I was told there'd be no math.
You're doing great. And Lauren is asking once again, it's totally okay to ask for proof of vaccination from your team members, right?
Yes.
Great.
As long as you have a process in place for religious and health exemptions.
And then Cynthia is asking if we can provide some more specific language on this. Cynthia, I think what would be best is we have some great language from Monty and Ramirez. I'm happy to send that around, and Kelsey is too. We'll send that around whenever we send that out, so that you can just use that language. They have some great language you can just copy and paste and use as communication with your staff, just to make sure you're not accidentally discriminating in any way. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I will say if you're considering a vaccine requirement for your employees, just think through the timing of that. You obviously need to give folks time to comply, especially if they need a 2-dose series. And I would also really encourage you to have open lines of communication with your employees. I've talked to a couple of restaurants who have done this, and where they've really seen success is when it's been an educational process. So it wasn't just you have to do this or you're fired. It was what questions do you have? What resources do you need? How can I schedule a vaccine drive for here at the business? Many of our local public health authorities will bring a mobile vaccine clinic to your business to get your folks vaccinated. So just really think about how you would kind of phase that in, how you would give folks time to have their questions answered. I think a lot of the vaccine hesitancy isn't sort of a hard and fast, I'm opposed to it. It's, I don't know, will it affect my fertility? Can I get it if I have type 1 diabetes, right? It's these very specific questions. And so I would just encourage you to think about how you'll handle that and how it'll be a process and not just you're in or you're out.
Rusty is asking a very tricky question on, can we refuse to hire someone who is not vaccinated, even if they base it on a religious issue? So someone who doesn't work for you currently, who you want to hire, you might be able to refuse to hire them based on their vaccine refusal because of religious issues.
Generally speaking, no. If they have a bona fide religious exemption, then you have to honor that. It gets a little more complicated in terms of what does that mean? You can't just suddenly say, I woke up today and decided I have a religious reason and I don't want a vaccine. There are specific things that have to be shown and worked through. Again, that's something Monty and Ramirez can definitely help you with. But if they meet that threshold for a religious exemption, then you do have to honor that.
But you don't have to, you should not feel forced to hire somebody, right? I mean, you don't want to discriminate when you're hiring, but like there may be other reasons to not hire that person. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't come right out and say, we're not going to hire you because you refuse to be vaccinated because you have this religious exemption. That seems like not a good idea.
Correct.
Yeah. Don't do that. Okay, Al is asking, good question, Al. The tax structure earlier that we were discussing was for mixed beverage license holders. Is it the same for beer and wine license holders?
No, beer and wine is not it. So if you do not have a mixed beverage license at all, then your beer and wine is subject to regular sales tax. If you have a mixed beverage license, then your beer and wine is subject to all the mixed beverage taxes.
Got it.
So it just depends on the type of license you have. If you have a mixed beverage license, then the higher rates apply. If you don't, then it's regular sales tax.
Got it. All right. Thanks, Kelsey. Okay, we answered all the questions in the Q&A window. I know Alexandra is focused on Facebook to see if there's any questions coming from there. I haven't seen any, just some chats. And thank you, Jessica, for tagging everybody that you know, so to make sure that they were able to join in this, to join in on this. Oh, Rusty, good. Okay, good question. Follow up from the vaccine requirement. Could you place an ad that states you must be vaccinated to work here?
I believe so. I cannot give you specific legal advice.
That's a good question, though. I think we should ask Monty and see what he thinks on that, because that is a good question. I'm not sure. I know that I have seen those kinds of ads out there already, and I just sort of moved past it. But we'll ask to find out.
Good question.
All right, Maria, I see you've raised your hand. I'm going to give you the chance to talk in case you want to ask your question. If you want to unmute yourself, you can ask Kelsey straight.
Hi, no, thank you very much. I am, I was like messing with the buttons.
Oh, it's okay.
Sorry. You answered all my questions though, so thank you very much.
Great.
Sure, thank you.
I'll highlight a few other, we're already at 3, so I guess I won't.
Yeah, I mean, that we filled an hour pretty quickly. That was a lot. Oh, I like that photo. That's such a good one. Thank you guys for participating in that day. Again, I know I said it many times in the chat, we will share these slides, we'll share the recording, we'll share a bunch of links to the comptroller's office as well as to our friends over at Monty and Ramirez. But I really appreciate you all joining. Kelsey, you anything you want to close with?
I ended with this picture for a reason. It really does take a village at the Capitol. It takes every one of our contributors to PAC, to Traction. Every time you send an email in response to our phone to action campaigns, that is why we were able to have such a successful legislative session. I can't emphasize that enough. But there's still more we need to do. There's still more we can do. So please keep it up. We're in a busy campaign season right now. So PAC contributions, for those of you who don't know, that's basically how we pool our industry's resources together and then decide who we want to contribute to for their election. So it's a great way to stay involved in politics at the state level. But really just thank you, because it takes a village, and that is why we had such a successful session. So thank you all for being here today. Don't hesitate to reach out if you have more questions or need more direction. We're here for you. So thank you.
Thanks, y'all. Have a good day.